what happened next? Well, I met a certain councillor for Didsbury called Andrew Simcock, some of you might be familiar with, and at the unveiling of the Emily Williamson plaque, which had been crowdfunded by the people of Didsbury. And I started talking to him about statues, because I knew that he was one of the people behind the Emmeline Pankhurst statue. No need to explain that one to any of you. And I said, what about a statue of Emily Williamson? I mean, she founded the RSPB. That's pretty big, isn't it? 2 million members. And you don't say something like that idly to someone like Andrew. He was like, right, we're on. So, woo, bit of a roller coaster since then. We opened it out to sculptors all over the world last November, I think it was, and invited them to put in their entry to their rendition of this woman with her connection with birds, what aspect of the story were they going to pick up on. And we had many entries. We chose a short list of 12. This story seemed to really resonate with people from New York to Tuscany. We had many people, men and women. Short list of 12, that went out to vote. These are just their kind of rough sketches, some in more detail than others. And from that public vote, and also our statue selection committee, which includes Becky Spate, who's the new female head at the RSPB, we chose 4. And they are currently on the road with Andrew, and sometimes joined by me, the length and breadth of the country, going to iconic RSPB reserves. They'll be at Leighton Moss next Wednesday, and people are visiting, voting, but you can also vote online. So I'll just take you through the 4. This one is by Billie Bond. They just happen to all be by women. That was never our intention, but I am, I guess, pretty chuffed. Billie is female. She has honed in on the idea of the bird hat, the murderous millinery. And here Emily's holding out a hat with a bird of paradise on it. It's upside down though. She's turning it upside down and giving it back to the birds as a bird bath, which is why there's a little robin perching on the brim. And this would indeed function as a bird bath in Fletcher Moss Park. Here's Billie. And you can see a little bit more detail in her little clay model of that bird of paradise, based on a hat that she managed to find on eBay from the High Victorian era. And Claire Abbott has decided to focus on this idea of handing the baton on to the next generation, because boy, are we going to need them to pick up the pieces of the mess that we've created. This is Emily Williamson with her great niece, Melissa Bateson, the bird scientist, taken from photographs of Melissa as a little girl. You can imagine the selfies that would be taken, people putting their children in Emily's other arm there. They're looking to the skies and they're looking to the future. And Melissa is holding a starling. Here she is with her father. A starling, numbers in Manchester have fallen by something hideous, like 60%. In the last 10 years. I mean, they're now, starlings used to be everywhere. They're now endangered. So that's Claire Abbott's entry. And then we've got Eve Shepherd, who has conceived Emily's crinoline. As you get closer, you realize that it's like a sort of cliff face studded with vignettes of birds, both birds used in the millinery trade back then, birds that are endangered for whatever reason, usually habitat loss today. Lots of little vignettes in her skirts. Something that just kind of keeps on giving the more you look at it. There's Eve with her Emily. And there's just a detail just to show some of the bird life. She's definitely got an egret in there. I can see a nest with eggs. There's crested grebe. There's emperor penguin, albatross. And finally, Laury Dizengrernel, who has gone for this very intimate emotional connection between a woman and a bird. And I think women probably do birds differently. Not so interested in those life lists and all the expensive equipment. More often than not, one's birding has to happen while you're kind of busy cooking, looking out of the kitchen window. That's where I keep my binoculars. Many of us probably do. And yeah, this very simple, loving, intimate Emily and bird. So there they are. I urge you all to vote. You've definitely got access to the internet or you wouldn't be here today. It's emilywilliamsonstatue.com. And you can have a closer look at those designs. There are little 2-minute films from each sculptor explaining what their idea is. But better still, come and see them because they will be at Manchester Art Gallery the first 2 weeks of November, 1st to the 14th of November. And there will also be some large portraits of Etta Lemon, Eliza Phillips, and Emily Williamson. There'll be photographs of women working in the RSPB today, Emily's legacy. And in the middle week of November, the 13th and 14th, there's going to be a programme of live events. Fingers crossed that can happen at the gallery all day, Saturday and Sunday, exploring Emily's extraordinary legacy, looking at science, conservation, campaigning, storytelling, history and legacy. So I really hope that some of you will be able to take part in that and visit at the gallery. And if you go onto our website and subscribe, you will be kept up to date. So just finally, what happened to Etta? Etta Lemon, who, the dragon, the dynamo, the woman who gave 50 years of her life to the RSPB. Well, when my book came out in 2018, it was called Mrs. Pankhurst's Purple Feather, because the publishers just couldn't get their heads around women and birds. They kept saying, we don't think it's going to work to put that kind of birding woman on the front. You know, men and birds, yes. Women and birds, not really. Which was quite frustrating. There was also the suffragette bandwagon, wasn't there, at the centenary, 2018. So I'm really thrilled to say that when the paperback came out this summer, we had a bit of a change. It's now got a new title, Etta Lemon, the Woman Who Saved the Birds. And of course, it isn't just Etta. Emily Williamson, Vital, Eliza Phillips, the Duchess of Portland, all their local secretaries, the length and breadth of the country. It was very much a collaborative movement. But I guess every author has their, you know, the person they're rooting for within their book, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. And, you know, Etta, the Marmite character, I found her really intriguing. So she's on the front of the book. And at RSPB Dungeness, she was born in Hythe on the Kent coast, just next door to Dungeness, very far from you. She is going to get a hide named after her and a trail. Here she is with husband Frank with binoculars at the ready. So I'm going to leave it there and hope that maybe some of you have a question or two and that you've perhaps learned something you didn't know over your lunch.
Well, thank you very much for that, Tessa. It was a really, really interesting talk and timely too, wasn't it? With the elections going on and the exhibition at the art gallery as well later in October, I think you said.
Yes.
So it'll be really useful to have that information that you gave us. Right. Are there any questions from anybody or comments? Yes, Val?
I might have missed this because obviously you had been talking, Tessa, when I zoomed in. But when you referred to the RSPB, you didn't say the Royal Society, you just said the Society.
Yes, that was
I wondered why you did that.
Yeah, when it was first created by Emily Williamson in 1889, it had no royal assent, you know, it was just her little kind of club. So it was the Society for the Protection of Birds. And then in 1904, they got the royal assent, which was really, really important to them. They were then taken seriously. That was pretty good going for a little charity. It started very small, partly down to the sort of nous and good influence of Frank Lemon, who was a barrister, Etta's husband. He kind of knew which strings to pull, how to fill out the forms and oil the wheels. Yeah, the RSPB it became, but very ironically, at that point, when it got the Royal Charter, Etta, who was honorary secretary, could no longer be honorary secretary because the charity with the Royal Charter couldn't have a woman in that position in 1904. Isn't that ironic? And so Frank Lemon had to take on that role nominally, and Etta, carried on doing what she was doing. But I did find it a great irony. For example, reading her husband's obituary, he died in the 30s, reading his obituary in the Surrey Mirror, saying that Mr. Lemon was amply aided by his wife in his work for the Bird Protection Society. And I thought, well, that's not really the way around it was. So yeah, how history gets somehow misremembered. And yeah.
Well, certainly women's role in it.
Absolutely, yes.
So thank you. It's a really thoroughly interesting talk. Thanks so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a comment?
Some people often ask, why were ostrich plumes accepted? They were allowed to be worn, and that's because the ostrich didn't die or suffer for its plumes. They were farmed in what was then called the Cape, South Africa, which was a British colony, and the ostrich feather industry was worth, millions to Britain. Nobody wanted to really tangle with that. But I think it did send out a conflicting message. I mean, you were either kind of, anti-wearing feathers or you weren't. And, the ostrich feathers were allowed, but it was a certain look that then promoted, which, other birds paid the price for.
Well, one thing I thought about it is how many sort of contradictions there are in it. Or you think somebody's just a pure hero or heroine, and then you find it wasn't quite like that, which, because history is messy like that, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think a lot of that was forgotten in 2018, when we were looking at the suffrage centenary. It was all kind of, go Emmeline. And I spent a lot of time researching Emmeline Pankhurst, and I'm very conflicted about her, really. I think she was, extraordinary what she achieved, but she was a megalomaniac. She kind of went a bit bonkers. She became a Conservative candidate. She completely switched from the Labour Party to Conservatives. And kind of it was all about her. And with the RSPB women, it wasn't about them at all, which really in part is why they haven't been remembered. Yeah, history is messy. And when you've got a statue campaign, you've just got to, hope that some dreadful thing isn't dredged up, some connection to slavery, goodness knows what, in today's climate. But, real people. And I think women should be real people. They shouldn't be idolized on pedestals. We have to accept that values then don't necessarily match values today. And yeah, that seems increasingly difficult for people to accept and understand. Okay,
anybody else? Tony, you want to?
Yeah, can you just tell us if you know anything more about Emily Williamson? What happened to her?
Yes, I can. What happened to her? Well, she remained a vice president to her death. The couple moved from Didsbury down to Brook in Surrey in 1911. They left the croft. She moved down there. Emily didn't have children, and she was very close to her nephews, who were at the public school Charterhouse. And they moved to be close to them. I think their parents were living in the colonies, so she was like a surrogate mother. She continued to run her own RSPB kind of group down there, also highly active in the WI. She was a great social philanthropist, Emily. It wasn't just the RSPB. She set up a loan training fund for professional women in Manchester. She was highly influential in getting nurses to train using real children, not dolls, as they were sort of training to be what we call pediatric nurses today. So she had many different interests, and she died at ripe old age, living in Kensington, into her late 80s, but not really remembered. So it's been pretty good to put her back on the map and to reunite her with her relatives too, so that we try and keep her legacy and story, live and out there, because I think we need a bit of inspiration today when it comes to the environment. And I think the statue will be a springboard and a kind of rallying point for people, I hope, to take action for nature.
Thank you.
Philip?
Yes, in this area, the only person we remember is Emily Williamson. So thank you for letting us know about all these other people.
Well, yes, I know Manchester is very partisan to Emily Williamson, and rightly so. But yeah, it's a story of North and South, but essentially one of collaboration, I think. Yeah. So yeah, if you come to Manchester Art Gallery when the maquettes are there, you'll see these beautiful big portraits of the other women involved who've been part of my talk today.
Well, I think we better call a halt to it there. Thank you once again for the part you played in covering all this as well. Sort of a hidden history, wasn't it, really?